Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimbari, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching podcast. Talked on a few episodes about how teachers can strategize, how they can plan better so that way they can take control of their time. We've also talked about ways that teachers can prioritize their mental health. And tonight we're going to continue that theme about talking around the issues of teacher sustainability, or should I say teaching sustainability, and how teachers can arrange their days of teaching so they have their nights to spend with their families or to do whatever they need to do. As we all know, teacher burnout is real. With that in mind, I'm really excited to be joined tonight by Ellen Linnihan. She's the author of Teacher Time Management: How to Prioritize Your Day So You Can Enjoy Your Evening. Ellen is a ELA teacher in Wisconsin. She also teaches public speaking. Ellen, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Ellen, can you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write a book about teacher time management? And why do you think this is such an important topic to discuss?
Well, like you mentioned, a lot of people just get burned out, especially at this time of year. And it doesn't need to be that way. It's a profession that we all chose for a reason, hopefully a good reason. We found some kind of joy in the idea of teaching. How do we maintain that, or how do we rekindle that quest, that love, and not feel like we're just completely stretched thin all the time? And you can only fake it for so long. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not taking care of your students.
You do need to prioritize yourself, because how can you give to your students if you're empty? And that's not benefiting our students if you're grouchy, if you're not patient, because that is what our students need. But
Mhm.
I totally agree with you. I just do a lot of coaching in schools, and you could tell the wear and tear, not only on the teachers, but you could tell that the students know that summer is coming. They just know it. It's a challenge. We have to make use of every moment of our time. What do you think are some of the ways that teachers tend to burn themselves out? If we could talk a little bit about what do you think teachers do that they shouldn't be doing, and what should we be doing more of to maintain that life career balance?
One of the main things, and I think back to when I first started teaching, you would give an assessment and you'd be so excited to see how your students did on it. And you want that whole big chunk of time to sit down and look through everything and grade it all on the spot. The reality is we don't have that big chunk of time to do that. Putting that pressure on ourselves to feel like we've got to do it in the evening or do it on the weekends, that's an unsustainable goal. If you have a life outside of school, and hopefully you do, you can't give all of that free time. We establish a pattern, a lot of us, from the very start, of this sense of I can't wait to dig into it, and or to plan that unit or whatever it is. And shifting the mindset of what can I get done right now, little chunks of it, and using my time more wisely so that I'm doing the kinds of things that are most appropriate for what's happening around me, whether I'm in my classroom or if it is in the evening, am I doing things that bring me joy in teaching? Social media stuff, those kinds of things that I don't mind doing, watching TV, but I shouldn't be doing those things during my prep time, when that's pedal to the metal time, when I need to focus, I need to do things like grading essays. Just shifting your idea of what's appropriate to be doing when can save you so much time, because those essays that you're trying to do in the wrong time slot might be taking you way longer to do because it's just not conducive to really good focus.
I think what I'm hearing you say, Ellen, is During your prep period, instead of perhaps going for that coffee or at least making it quick, or stopping off in your peer's classroom who also has a prep period to chat, unless again it is a PLC. But if
Mhm.
it's your dedicated prep time, you really should be using that to prep.
Right. When you think about the most valuable minutes that you have, it's that time when you're alone in your classroom. I know people have different amounts of that. Whatever you have, it's super valuable. I've got a Keurig next to my desk. I don't leave my desk during my prep time to go get coffee because I can make it right there. So, a lot of those little tips and tricks just to help you to stay focused, not get derailed, and even printing. I will make notes of what do I need to print, but I'm going to print at the very end of my prep time so that I don't linger too long, get distracted, start talking to people because
All right.
I'm the queen of talking to people in the hallway. I know the deal. I know I need to focus and really prioritize those minutes in my classroom.
So, speaking of that, what has worked for you in terms of prioritizing those minutes in your prep period? How do you spend that time most efficaciously?
The biggest thing is to understand because it's high concentration mode, making the list of what to do, that needs to happen some other time. You can't spend the first 10 to 15 minutes of your prep time figuring out what you're going to do with your prep time because that's lower concentration activity that you could be doing at the end of the day before maybe where when the kids are packing up their stuff you're jotting a little note of what do I need to get done during my prep time first thing in the morning. I don't waste any minutes while I have that high concentration mode doing things that I could be doing in other times of the day.
You bring up a concept that I read about in your book, which is this concept of mode. And I
Mhm.
think you refer to it as low intensity mode, mid intensity, and high concentration mode, correct?
Right. Hmm.
Speaking of those modes, and you were more or less introducing this now, you were talking about prep period being high concentration mode, to be in the weeds, grading, or getting those high concentration tasks done. And let's face it, grading of essays and grading of student work can be a very draining slog, especially if you're trying to help students with understanding multiple skills or you're evaluating multiple areas of student proficiency. Let's talk a little bit about what you mean by those modes. What do you do in each of those modes? And when do you do those modes?
If you make the analogy of a room temperature, you dress in layers because you just never know if the air is going to be on that day or if it's going to be super hot and sweaty in the classroom, right? You got to adjust. Your modes are the same way. You might think, I'm going to get all these essays graded because these kids are going to be watching a video and I'm going to be able to focus. And then instead, you're completely derailed because the video is actually kind of engaging and distracting to you. You got to be able to shift, just like you'd take the sweater off, you got to be able to shift your mode. Instead of just getting pulled into the video, what else could you be doing that maybe doesn't require the kinds of focus that grading essays would take and shift into a different mode, into maybe a lower concentration mode. So, okay, I can't concentrate. I'm too distracted by the video, or I'm too distracted by kids are asking me more questions than I thought they were going to be asking me during this time that I thought was going to be time when I was going to get something done. What could I be doing instead? You should always have, whether they're physical lists or just mental lists of things that you could be doing if the mode shifts. And maybe it's even just your own concentration mode. There are times when it's a Friday afternoon and my kids are perfectly silent working on preparing a speech, writing out outlines. I am done. I cannot think about another thing today. Instead, I may be straightening up my bookshelves or boxing things that need to go back to the book room, things that physically need to be done in my classroom, but don't take any concentration at all. To just sit, scroll through your feed on your social media, or probably shouldn't be doing that at work, checking email more than you need to be doing at that point just because you're distracted. If you have some things lined up to do, future you will thank you because you're not then sticking around after school to box up those books and take them to the book room. Having the flexibility to recognize when either your mode shifts or the kids' mode shifts and having those tasks lined up and ready to go so that you can really use all those minutes to the best of their ability is going to help you in the long run because a lot of times I would find myself spacing out a little bit. For example, between speeches when kids give speeches, There's a little bit of shuffle time in between where they're writing feedback for each other and I'm pulling up the next slideshow for the next kid. But I used to stack things up on the side, the rubric that I had just filled out for the previous speech, or their self-evaluations that they're handing to me as they finish doing them. So instead of just setting those to the side, I just know there's something I need to be doing right now. When I feel myself kind of drifting off, what should I be doing? Oh, I should be actually glancing at that self-evaluation. And I have lots of stampers. Even though I teach high school, I stamp things, good job, 100%. It forces me to focus on doing those little manual tasks because something that only takes maybe 15 seconds to glance over a self-evaluation and see that they took it seriously and what's one goal that they have for the next speech, I can put a stamp on that. I can put that in the grade book and be done with it. But if I let 60 of those stack up over the course of the day, that's 15 minutes, maybe a half hour after school that I didn't need to wait to do that. If I have the discipline to do it on the spot and really hold myself accountable to that, I end up using my minutes in a more effective way. The time goes faster. I get the work done and I get out of there.
You're talking to another point that I often end up talking about with teachers, and that is this concept of grading. When you were talking about you look over what they did in their speech and you look over to see if they have an understanding of what they need to do next time to
Mhm.
improve their speech, what I'm hearing is you're not necessarily grading everything. And that's something that I also often coach the teachers that I work with to understand also what are you grading and how are you grading it. Yes, an essay, you're probably going to have to spend a lot of time going through that essay, but an exit ticket or a classroom audience participation rubric when they're
Mhm.
listening to a presentation, maybe you don't have to grade everything. Maybe you are, like you just said, looking for something specific. And I
Mhm.
think that that is also a time saving technique that we don't talk about a lot. I think in education, we almost have a martyr complex, Ellen, where
Yes.
I'm going to grade absolutely everything because my students need it, as if this is the only time you're going to be able to actually evaluate and assess student work. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Absolutely. I think there's value in the kids doing it, even if you don't read every word. They don't know which words you're going to spot check, what you're specifically be looking to assess on any given self-evaluation that they might be doing. But it's meaningful for them to go through that process and to compare it to their previous speeches. There is value in that. And there's more feedback than just what we give them. At least in my class, they go immediately into the hallway, watch their speech on their phone. They come back into a whole stack of little scraps of paper on their desk because everybody has put a little bit of feedback on their desk. Watching themselves, reading feedback from their peers, by the time they get my feedback, they already know how they did. I think we need to stop taking ourselves quite so seriously in terms of being the be all and the end all and let others weigh in on that as well. The biggest thing is that it gives feedback in a timely fashion. But I hear kids talking about some teachers don't give anything back for a month. By the time they get it back, they don't even remember what they wrote. There's no meaningful feedback in that regard. Even if it's quick and a stamp, they know you looked at it. They know you processed it. You put a grade in the grade book. I write one or two little blurbs about something that they've written. That's enough. That's all they need. They just need it back fast and they need to move to the next thing and learn and grow and stop getting so stuck in the weeds.
And you said something really valuable just there, and that is we are not the owner of all feedback. We are not the font of all knowledge. If we truly are creating student centered classrooms, that means helping students to do their own evaluation of their own work, which fits right into growth mindset. And
Mhm.
like you said, Ellen, if you give students a rubric, a quality rubric in terms of presentations or papers or poster projects, a rubric that really goes into what is the difference between, say, developing proficiency, proficient work, and advanced proficient work, even if you have just three or four characteristics within one project, the feedback that students generate for each other equal to, if not even sometimes superior
Mhm.
to the feedback the teacher would give.
There's more of them. And so there's only one of me and I'm looking, are you citing your sources? Are you making eye contact? All these other things too. And there might be somebody That was such a really awesome picture you put on that visual because it totally connected to that other book that we read previously. Getting somebody else's feedback, it's awesome. They don't need just me. I only have my perception, but they all have something valuable to add to it as well.
Going back to your book a little bit more and talking about these modes, what are the typical, and I think you were already starting to talk about this, what are the typical times in a day that one could foresee that you are going to be low on energy, so those should be low intensity or times for low intensity activity. And what are those times? And we've already talked about your prep period being
Mhm.
a high intensity period of time. Can you take us through or walk us through a typical day and how the modes more or less fit in
Mhm.
the different times of a day?
Well, and I'm sure there's a difference between elementary school teachers who have the kids, pretty much the same kids all day. I know that I'm shifting, I'm going in and out of concentration. Kids are like that too. Noticing when you need those breaks, that shift in energy and different types of activities to be doing at those times. Just because we need a break doesn't mean we need chaos. My classes are all 85 minutes long. I give them a 5 minute wiggle in the middle of the block to get up, use the restroom, get a drink of water, whatever. Just move something other than their thumbs on their phones. By the end of the block, they're watching the clock. They know they're ready to check out. Oftentimes, what I'll do is I'll just put on the smart board a Google Doc that says what to do now. There's a whole checklist of things that they could be doing to not waste those minutes. Maybe it's you need to send a follow up email about, specifically in my class, they have to do a community speech. Maybe you need to follow up on that community speech email that you've kind of been letting slide. Or maybe you need to take 5 minutes and write your self reflection on how your first five discussion went. So all these are specific to my class, but they're tiny little tasks that don't need high concentration. They don't need a lot of time to do them. If they're doing research on persuasive speech topic and they have to have 4 sources with notes on them, I'll just do a formative, okay, show fingers, how many sources have you found? And they'll stick their fingers up in the area. I've got my 4 sources or whatever. And then, okay, how many of them have notes on them already? Oh, well, now we only have 2 fingers up. It gives me a sense that's a quick little low concentration mode thing that I can do to check in on my students, and it also holds them accountable as well. All right, so you don't have your notes. You see around you other people are further around ahead than you are. What could you do? Could you at least do a search and find some articles right now, even if you're not going to read them? You know where your concentration level is if you're not in the point of actually writing something meaningful or actually reading through something important. Maybe you could do a Google search for something, or you could go to the databases and find some good articles. Giving them a smorgasbord of options of things to do when the modes shift.
What I like what you were saying, Ellen, is we started by talking about teacher's mode at intensity mode, and then we even shifted to talking about even helping students to understand their modes and what they could
Mhm.
be doing when they're at a low intensity mode. I really like how this concept of mode can work not only for teachers and helping them regulate themselves, but also helping our students to regulate themselves as well. Are there aspects of the book that you want us to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
One of the things that touches on my previous book, Capturing the Classroom, this all started for me because I had a student and the guidance counselor came to me and said, your student, he's going to be homebound for the first 5 weeks of your 9 week class. And we really don't want him to come because he's gone through cancer treatments and we don't want him exposed to germs. But he is losing his mind and wants to be back in class. And I had the challenge of trying to keep him away and yet trying to keep him engaged. And this was way before COVID, and Zoom was not a thing yet. That's really what ignited this passion in me in terms of using video to help reach the needs that the kids have. And so what I started doing was FaceTiming. I had one of the students FaceTime with this kid, checked out a Chromebook for the whole term, and we would connect with him every day. When he had to be gone for treatments, I would record for him. It was about a week into it when another kid in the class came to me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be gone, and I know you record sometimes for this other student. Do you think you could share that recording with me too?" Whoa. why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we recording everything for everybody all the time? And then they can access it whenever they need it. They blew the doors off my classroom. Creating tutorials and creating videos of classroom discussions and me reading chapters of books and putting them in a spot where kids can access them, but not just kids, the parents can access them, the special ed teachers can access them. It's what prompted me to start thinking about time management, because when a kid comes back into my classroom after being gone and they say, "What did I miss?" It's kind of insulting to think that you could condense that into a 5 minute, this is what you missed yesterday. Like,
Right.
what was the point of my teaching for an hour and a half if I can condense it to 5 minutes? But if I can say, hey, check out the week at a glance document, and there's a video link that talks through the assignment that I introduced. And if you have any questions, circle back. But better yet, because they have access to that, they don't even wait to come into class. They do it before they get there. Or if they're going to be gone, they work ahead and they check out all those resources ahead of time. I often say, whether you were physically gone or just mentally taking a little break that day, the videos are there. Go to those first. If you still have questions, then ask me. But ideally, you're not doing homework at 1 o'clock in the morning either. I'm not going to answer your questions at 1 o'clock in the morning. But if you really need me, I'm there on video. But if we're prioritizing getting our work done in the classroom, so you can do the things that you want to do in the evening as well.
Ellen, some of your friends have given you reviews that are still in the classroom, talking about what benefited them and this concept of overall time management. Anything specifically from your friends? Because, like you said, the book has only recently come out, but
Mhm.
any of your friends that are educators, did they give you any specific thoughts as to what really resonated with them?
Some of the analogies, I talk often about the rollout cookie analogy. When you make rollout cookies, you put your cookie cutters down as close as you can to each other, but there's always those little scraps of dough in between. And nobody just throws those away. We reshape them, we roll them out again, or make them into special shapes. We can see the value in those little scraps of dough, but we don't see the value necessarily in our little scraps of time. And if we start to look at those scraps of time as having just as much value, that's something that resonates. What are you throwing away? When you find yourself spacing out, the students are pulling out their papers, whatever they're doing that doesn't require your direct supervision, what are you doing during that time? Are you holding yourself accountable for doing something meaningful? If you don't know what to do during that time, make a list. And then you've got that little checklist of, I need to organize this area of the classroom, or I need to weed out folders, or I need to check my white dry erase board markers, or for me, even it's like I always write on the board what the agenda is for the day, and at the end of the day, they're not reading that anymore. I can go ahead and start doing tomorrow's on the board, getting things prepped, starting to think always ahead and not wasting those little minutes, because those little minutes really add up in the end. I'm getting so efficient. I'm getting to the point where I'm not assigning big major papers at the end of the term. I've reworked how and when things are due. And once you get to that point, you start to look for other ways to be more efficient. And it's so much more satisfying when you can do all the things you were doing before, probably doing them better, and still having a life outside of the classroom.
For the listeners who are English teachers, who do have to grade papers, and you were already saying, don't assign big papers at the end of the term, what tips would you have specifically for English teachers or anyone who's assigning written work, how they could manage that more effectively? You've already
Yeah.
given one tip.
So take a look at your course UBD. It's not like you can just go rogue and say, "Okay, I'm not going to teach the last 3 weeks because I don't want to do that." So figure out what kinds of things you could be doing. Is there a speaking component to your UBD that you need to address? Have them do some kind of speech, something like that. So can you push that unit to the very end? Because it's way easier to grade a speech on the spot than to grade a paper on the spot. That's one possible way to do it.
Ellen, what have we not talked about that you want our listeners to know?
I would like for people to just know that My whole concept, I'm fascinated with Calvin and Hobbes, the cartoon. And there was this whole series of the duplicator that where Calvin has this cardboard box and he creates more Calvins through the duplicator. He makes more copies of himself, and he makes all of his duplicates do the work that he doesn't want to do. Like they go down and do the chores and they do the homework, and he gets to play with Hobbes. And I was so fascinated with this concept of how do we duplicate ourselves? We can with video. We really can, in the sense that the kids need something from you, but they don't need it fresh. They need the solid concept. And if you create a video of it, there's no end to how many times somebody can tap into that and they can learn from you. And the more you use video, the more time you free up for yourself, in the sense that I'm now free to answer questions of kids that have a unique question that I haven't answered before, I haven't made video before, or even if it's a document, I do a frequently asked questions document on different units. So if we're doing a debate unit, I've got an FAQ that every time a kid asks me a question, I put it on this document and I write my answer. I tell them, go to that document before you come and ask me a question, because the answer is probably there. And if the question isn't on there, I want to know it because I'm going to answer it. I'm going to put it on there. And it got to the point where I would teach this unit, I would introduce it, and they would have a whole week with their team to research this topic. And you could hear a pin drop. They didn't say a single word to me for a week because they were deep in their research. They were looking at that document. If they did have a question, they came over and asked quietly because they didn't want the other team to hear them and know what they were plotting on their defense. It's such a great concept for every unit. Make yourself an FAQ for everything that you do. If you teach something more than once, it's worth making an FAQ and it's worth making a video, because why would you waste time doing the same thing over again? Duplicate yourself, and then you've got more time for all the other cool things that you want to do and the questions that they have and the new things that come up. You don't have to waste time reteaching something that you've already taught. So having that backup, it's a nice insurance policy for yourself. Frees you up if you're going to go to a conference, or you don't have to feel like I can't take a sick day because what are my kids going to do? They're going to do exactly what you had planned for them to do because you've left video and an FAQ, and everything's going to be fine. You're not going to do it for a whole year. It's really nice when you need it for an emergency or for backup in the classroom when the kids have questions and you've already answered them. They can just tap into that.
And then when you put those FAQs and those videos online, whether that's through Google Classroom or Google Drive or what have you, then it's there, and then kids don't even have to fumble for the papers.
Right. I have one week at a glance. Anything that we're doing is on my week at a glance. Everything's linked there. They know exactly how to get to everything that they need, and so do parents. So the parents get this once a week on a communication. They know how to navigate. I the days of getting emails from parents feeling frustrated, confused, my kid's failing, how do I help? I don't know how to make sense of what's going on. Those days are long gone for me. I very rarely hear from parents unless they have something complimentary to say. Not a brag fest, it's just a reality that when you have really good communication in place and you have all of your resources super easy to navigate and readily available to them, they don't ask as many questions. And the kids do better, and people are far less frustrated in the long run because it's easy to navigate, and people tend to be a little bit more successful if the communication is solid.
Ellen, where can people find out more about you and the work you do?
I'm on the Solution Tree website. Go on Solution Tree and search up Ellen Linnihan. Also on social media, you can find me Ellen Linnihan Author on Instagram. You can reach me on email if you want at ellenlinnihan@yahoo.com.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for your time today. This has been a very interesting conversation, and it went in several different directions, but all of which can help teachers save time. And that's what we aim to talk about. And I think we did it. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.